Get your people out of my clubhouse before I have you removed like trash." Marcus Delaney did not move. He stood there in a faded gray ball cap and work boots that had seen 15 years of Saturday mornings, and he let the words land on him the way rain lands on stone. Present, felt, but not enough to erode anything. "I have a reservation," he said. "My name is on the guest list." Grant Whitfield laughed, short and ugly, the kind of laugh a man practices in mirrors, until it sounds like confidence instead of cruelty. "Reservation? Sure you do. Take your family and go find a diner somewhere." "This isn't that kind of place." The man in the ball cap tilted his head, slow, like he was filing something away for later use. Because the general manager screaming about who belonged in his lobby had no idea that, 11 days ago, this quiet man in weekend clothes had signed the papers that made him the sole owner of every square foot of grass, marble, and mahogany in the building. Rewind 90 minutes, and you'll understand exactly how much Grant Whitfield was about to lose. The Delaneys came up the winding drive of Magnolia Bluff Country Club a little after 9 in the morning, tires humming over asphalt still damp from the sprinklers. Mark drove with one hand loose on the wheel. A cup of gas station, coffee sweating in the holder. He wore the same faded quarter zip he'd worn to 100 job sites over the years. Nothing about him whispered money, and that was exactly the point. The deal closed 11 days ago, he told his wife quietly, before the new management team steps in. "I want to walk through it the way a regular guest walks through it. See what it actually feels like from the other side of the counter." Renee Delaney squeezed his hand. "So we're spying." "We're visiting," Marcus said. "There's a difference, and today I intend to learn it." In the back seat, their 2 kids did what siblings do. Isaiah, 21, built wide and solid from 3 years of college football, kept stealing fries from a bag they'd grabbed off the highway. Zora, 18, swatted his hand away, without even glancing up from her phone. She was the real reason they had driven 3 hours that morning. Zora had qualified for the club's amateur invitational, one of only 4 public bracket spots the tournament offered that year, and the laminated credential card sat in her lap like something fragile enough to shatter if she breathed on it wrong. "You nervous?" Renee asked her. "Nope," Zora said. Then, smaller. "Yeah. A little." They parked themselves at the far end of the lot, driver, no fuss, and walked in together through the front entrance like anyone else would. The lobby hit them with a wall of cold air and old money. Marble floor, polished to a mirror shine, a curved staircase sweeping up toward a mezzanine, oil portraits of stern men in argyle sweaters watching from gilt frames. The whole room smelled like lemon polish and cut grass, drifting in from an open service door. Behind the front desk stood a woman in her 50s, with tired kindness in her eyes, and a brass name tag that read Louise. She was sorting the morning mail, and one envelope sat apart from the rest. Thick, cream-colored, embossed with a crest that read Delaney Heritage Holdings, Ownership Transition Notice. A man in a navy blazer breezed past the desk and flicked 2 fingers at it without slowing down. "File that corporate garbage, Louise. Nobody reads that stuff." Louise set the envelope in her tray. She did not file it. Something in her gut told her not to, though she could not have said why if you'd asked her right then. Near the bar, a woman in crisp tennis whites watched the family over the rim of a mimosa. Her name was Vivian Cross, and she had been a member long enough to believe she owned the very air in the room. Her eyes tracked the Delaneys from the door to the front desk. Slow and assessing, the way a hawk tracks something small moving through grass. She leaned toward her friend and murmured something behind her glass. The friend laughed without smiling, the kind of laugh that exists only to agree with cruelty. That was the first cold spot in the room. Small. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Marcus felt it anyway. He had spent a lifetime learning to read a room the way other men read weather, and he clocked this one in about 4 seconds, flat. He kept his shoulders loose, his pace unhurried, his eyes moving without seeming to move at all. Zora, meanwhile, did what she always did in new places. She lifted her phone and filmed a few seconds of the lobby, narrating under her breath like a tiny documentary host. Okay, tournament day, big fancy club. Dad's pretending he's not nervous for me. Marcus laughed. I'm not nervous. He's nervous, she told the camera, deadpan. Cameras blinked from the ceiling corners in 3 places that Marcus counted without trying to. A brass plaque by the front desk read, "Members and guests only beyond this point." The entire building ran on lists, who was written down and who was not. Nobody in that lobby guessed that the 18-year-old with the shaky phone was quietly recording everything, too. For one more minute, it was a good morning. Renee straightened Isaiah's collar, even though he was a grown man built like a door, and he groaned about it the way he had since he was 12. Zora checked her tea time against a printed sheet taped by the dining room entrance, found her name near the bottom, and grinned so wide it changed the whole shape of her face. Marcus watched his family move through the space and felt the quiet pride of a man who had built something enormous and finally brought the people he loved most to stand inside it. He had not planned to announce who he was. He had never needed to announce anything in his life. He just wanted to walk the grounds, shake a few hands, and watch his daughter play the course he now legally controlled, down to the last blade of Bermuda grass. They turned toward the dining room, easy and unhurried. A navy blazer stepped directly into their path, blocking it entirely. "Can I help you people find the exit?" the man said, smiling wide and warm and utterly empty behind the eyes. And just like that, the good morning ended. The man in the blazer was Grant Whitfield, general manager, according to the brass tag pinned crooked on his lapel. Silver hair combed back with too much product, a country club tan the color of old leather, and a smile that had never once reached his eyes in the 24 years he'd run this building his way. "Can I help you find the exit?" he repeated, slower this time, savoring every syllable like it was candy. "We're here for brunch," Marcus said evenly. "And my daughter's playing in the Invitational. We have a reservation under Delaney." Whitfield tilted his head, amused, and did not so much as glance toward the reservation book sitting open 6 feet away. "Do you now?" He let his gaze crawl down from the ball cap to the work boots, to the fast food bag, still in Isaiah's hand, and his lip curled like he'd caught a whiff of something spoiled. "I think you're a little confused, folks. This is a private club. Members only. Maybe you saw us on the local news segment and figured you'd wander in for a look around." "I didn't see you on the news," Marcus said. "We have a reservation, please. Check the book. It will take you 10 seconds. "I don't need 10 seconds, Whitfield snapped, his volume climbing, playing now to the tables that had started to notice. "I know exactly who belongs in my club, and I'm looking at exactly who doesn't." A few heads turned at nearby tables. A spoon clinked against china and went still. Somewhere near the piano, jazz kept playing soft and oblivious, a soundtrack scoring a scene it couldn't see. Behind the desk, Louise's hand drifted toward the reservation log, fingers resting on the open page like she was guarding it with her body. That was escalation 1, pure gatekeeping. A man deciding on sight that a family did not fit the picture he'd built in his head. Whitfield wasn't finished. He gestured at the fast food bag, like it was Exhibit A in a trial, only he was running. "Let me guess. Here to use the pool. Sneak in 9 holes before anybody notices. People like you always figure the rules are for somebody else." "People like us," Marcus repeated, very quietly. "You heard me. Don't make me spell it out in front of your kids." Renee stepped forward, calm but unmistakably firm. "Sir, our name is on your guest list. My daughter earned her spot in this tournament with 2 years of 5A. Practice. All we are asking is that you look." Whitfield's eyes slid over her, the way you look past a piece of furniture blocking a hallway. "Ma'am, I run this club. I don't take instructions from people who wandered in off the highway looking for a free Sunday brunch." That was escalation 2. The insult said out loud, polished and public, delivered for the whole room to hear. You could feel the temperature in the lobby actually drop. The good morning was gone, replaced by that particular silence a crowd makes when it quietly decides to watch instead of help. 41 people, by Marcus's later count, had forks in their hands and phones in their pockets and did not move. Zora's thumb found the record button on her phone. A tiny red dot bloomed in the corner of her screen. She lowered the phone to her hip, casual as anything, and kept the lens pointed square at Whitfield's chest. Whitfield raised one hand, and a heavy-set man in a security polo peeled off the far wall and started across the marble at a slow, deliberate walk, like a man who had been waiting all morning to finally be useful. His name was Dale Pruitt, and his radio crackled on his shoulder with a burst of far-off static. "We've got some trespassers," Whitfield announced, loud now, performing for the room. "Refusing to leave. You know the type." Pruitt hooked his thumbs into his belt and planted himself a foot from Marcus, chest out, breathing slow through his nose like he was warming up for something. "You folks need to head on out, right now. Don't make this difficult on yourselves." "We're guests," Marcus said. "You're a problem," Pruitt said. "Big difference, pal." That was escalation 3. The badge had arrived, and the threat had a body now. A body standing too close, breathing too loud, waiting for an excuse. Whitfield smelled the shift in the room and began circling, talking to the tables as much as to the family, feeding off every eye on him. "You see this every single season," he announced grandly. People who don't belong, trying to sneak in, then acting offended when somebody finally has the spine to call it out. And then they go home and post about it online, like they're the victims. He looked straight into the lens of Zora's phone and sneered. "Go ahead. Film me, sweetheart. 24 years I've run this place, and nothing is going to happen to me. Write that one down, buddy. Here's something worth remembering for later." "Show me identification," Whitfield barked, wheeling on Marcus again. "All of you. Right now, or Dale here walks you out the hard way." "You didn't card the couple who walked in right behind us," Isaiah said. It was the first thing he'd said all morning, his voice even but his jaw tight enough to crack a molar. 2 minutes ago. "You smiled and waved them straight through. You're only carding us." Whitfield's face went flat and hard. "I card whoever I please. This is my house." That was escalation 4. A rule invented on the spot, aimed at exactly one family, the oldest trick in the book, and every single person in that lobby knew it and said nothing at all. Vivian Cross had drifted closer. Phone already lifted and glowing, she wasn't filming for help. She tapped the screen, went live, and started narrating to her followers in a bright, poisoned little voice. "You guys are not going to believe what's happening at the club right now," she purred. "Some people have zero shame, I swear. Watch this." She panned the camera slowly across the family like they were animals behind glass, then typed a caption with 2 thumbs and a satisfied little smile, the kind you'd be ashamed to say out loud. Marcus saw all of it, the phone, the caption, the grin. He didn't lunge. He didn't raise his voice 1 decibel. He turned back to Whitfield and asked, flat and almost gentle, "What's your name, sir? Your full name and your title?" Whitfield puffed up, mistaking the calm for a man finally running out of fight. "Grant Whitfield, General Manager. I have run Magnolia Bluff for 24 years. He said it like a man planting a flag on a hill he thought he owned. "Write it down. Tell your little friends I am not hard to find." "I'll remember it," Marcus said, every word. There is a feeling that should have run cold down Whitfield's spine right then. It didn't. He was too busy winning in front of an audience to notice he was losing something far bigger. Behind the desk, Louise's hands had begun to shake. She slid 1 sheet from the reservation log, folded it once, and tucked it beneath the desk blotter, a printout, a name on a list, quiet proof waiting patiently for the moment it would matter most. She caught Renee's eye for half a second and gave the smallest possible nod. Renee understood it completely. Help sometimes arrives in the smallest, bravest shape a person has left to give. The lobby was full now. Brunch had simply stopped happening. A small child somewhere asked his mother what was going on, and the mother shushed him without ever looking away from the scene. Morning light poured through the tall windows and lit the whole ugly tableau up bright like a stage nobody had chosen to build. "Last chance," Whitfield said, stepping in close, dropping his voice to a hiss as only the front row could catch. "Take your kids and your little tournament card and crawl back to whatever neighborhood spat you out before I have you dragged through that door in front of every member here." Marcus looked at him for a long, long moment. He looked at his daughter, 18 years old, gripping the credential she had earned with 2 years of 5A. Practice, chin up, refusing to let a single tear fall. He looked, last of all, at the thick envelope sitting untouched in Louise's tray. "Whitfield," he said, "I want you to remember this exact moment, the way you're standing, the way you're smiling right now. Remember all of it." Whitfield laughed in his face. "Is that supposed to be a threat?" "No," Marcus said. "It's a favor. You just don't know it yet. Here is what nobody in that lobby understood in that instant, and what you are about to watch unravel." The man they had spent 11 minutes humiliating had already made one phone call from the parking lot before he ever walked through the front door, simply to confirm that the closing documents were filed and ready to move the moment he needed them. He was not bluffing. He had never once been bluffing. He reached into his jacket pocket. Pruitt tensed and stepped in, one hand hovering near his belt. Whitfield's smile flickered, then came back wider, certain the man was finally reaching for a wallet, a white flag, a beggar's last plea for mercy. Marcus pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a single saved name, pressed call, and lifted it to his ear, his eyes never once leaving Whitfield's face. The whole lobby seemed to hold its breath at once. Somewhere on the other end of that line, a phone began to ring. It rang twice before a voice picked up, dry and entirely unbothered, the voice of a woman interrupted on a Saturday and mildly annoyed about it. "Marcus, the closing's done. What do you need?" That was Renata Cole, his general counsel of 19 years. She did not do small talk, and she did not do panic. "Renata," Marcus said, calm as a man ordering coffee. "I'm standing in the front lobby at Magnolia Bluff. Pull the signed transfer documents, the ones with the management authority clause attached. Send them to the front desk here right now." A pause, the faint sound of a chair pushing back. "You okay?" 2 words, but they carried real weight. "I'm fine," Marcus said. "I just want it in writing, in this room, in the next 5 minutes. "Sending now," she said, and hung up. No drama. Just a woman forwarding paperwork that had already existed for 11 days. Whitfield watched the call end and burst out laughing, delighted with himself. "Oh, that's adorable," he called his lawyer. He turned to the room, arms spread wide, playing the crowd shamelessly. "Folks, we've got ourselves a tough guy here," called his attorney, because I asked him nicely to leave my club. A few members chuckled along. Vivian's livestream caught every second of it, the caption still glowing beneath the video for thousands of strangers to read. But here is the detail nobody in that room had clocked yet, and you should hold on to it, because it matters more than anything. Whitfield had shouted in the last 11 minutes. Marcus Delaney had not raised his voice one single time. Calm men who refuse to raise their voices are almost never the ones who end up losing. Pruitt crowded in closer, emboldened by his boss's applause. He put a flat hand against Isaiah's shoulder and shoved, just hard enough to move him a step toward the doors. "Let's go, big guy. Walk." Isaiah did not swing. He was 21 and built like a door, and could have ended the confrontation in one motion if he'd wanted to. Instead, he planted his feet, looked the guard dead in the eye, and said, "Take your hand off me." His voice did not shake, and that was the part that unnerved Pruitt, a man used to people flinching on command. "Or what?" Pruitt said. "Or you get to explain to a judge why you put your hands on a guest who never once threatened you," Isaiah said. "There are 3 cameras on you right now. 2 of them are ours." Pruitt's hand came off the shoulder, slowly, but it came off. He didn't retreat fully, though. He circled behind the family instead, close enough that Isaiah could feel the man's breath on the back of his neck, a slow and deliberate kind of menace built to make a person nervous without ever technically doing anything actionable. A member at a nearby table decided this was his moment to help, in the worst possible way. A red-faced man in checkered golf pants stood up, cloth napkin still tucked into his collar. "Just leave. Already," he called out. "You're ruining everyone's brunch." "Have some respect." "Respect," Renee repeated softly, and turned to look at him until he sat back down and found something urgently fascinating in his scrambled eggs. That was escalation 5. They had gone from words to hands in under 10 minutes, from insult to assault, right there on the marble in front of 41 witnesses and a live broadcast climbing towards 6,000 viewers. Whitfield did not like losing momentum, so he reached for the cruelest thing within arm's reach. He snatched the tournament credential straight out of Zora's hands. She gasped, a small involuntary sound that seemed to shrink the whole room around her. For 1 second she was 18 and she was 12, and she was every single age she had ever practiced through, all at once. Whitfield held the card up where everyone could see it clearly, then tore it, one clean rip straight down the center. 2 halves fluttered to the cold marble floor. "There," he said. "Now there's definitely no tournament for you." "Whoops." He smiled when he said whoops. That single word did more damage to him in that instant than anything a lawyer would say about him for the rest of the year. Nobody moved to pick up the card. Not the members, not the staff. The 2 halves simply lay there in a square of morning sunlight, and somehow that little laminated rectangle on the floor was louder than everything Whitfield had shouted all morning combined. Renee bent down. She picked up both halves, slow and deliberate, refusing to let her hands shake, even though every part of her wanted to. She did not cry, and she did not raise her voice. She straightened, tucked the 2 pieces into her purse like they were made of glass, and looked at Whitfield with something considerably colder than anger. "You are going to wish you had not done that," she said. "Is that another threat from the wife now?" Whitfield said, rolling his eyes. "It's the truth," Renee said. "There's a difference. You'll learn it in about 3 minutes. Zora leaned into her mother's side. "Mom," she whispered, 2 years, all of it." "I know, baby," Renee whispered back. "I know. Watch what your father does now. Just watch." That was escalation 6. Not louder this time, but crueler. The kind of cruelty that reaches specifically for a kid's 2 years of dawn, practice just to feel powerful for a moment. The kind of cruelty that has no idea it is signing its own confession while it smiles. Whitfield kept going because men like Whitfield always keep going right up until the floor disappears beneath them. He leaned in close and dropped that hiss again. Here's what happens now. You walk your family out that door, or I call the police and tell them you trespassed, threatened my staff, and refused a lawful order to leave. Guess who they believe? Me, every single time. So you should be grateful I'm letting you leave here at all. He let that hang in the air for effect. People like you, he added, always make it a scene. The lobby had gone dead silent. Pruitt had drifted to block the front doors. 2 junior staff members had drifted to block the side hallway without anyone telling them to. The Delaneys were boxed in on 3 sides now, a family in weekend clothes, surrounded, filmed, humiliated, with a torn dream sitting folded inside a purse. Vivian narrated the entire scene to her phone, gleeful and bright, You are seeing this live, you guys. Some people just do not get the hint. She zoomed in tight on Zora's wet eyes. That was the shot she wanted. Humiliation up close, packaged for an algorithm that rewards exactly this kind of cruelty. "Get that out of my daughter's face," Renee said, stepping between them. "It's a public space, honey," Vivian said, smiling, stepping sideways for a better angle. "I can film whatever I want." "Remember you said that," Marcus said quietly, not even bothering to turn around. "You're going to hear those exact words again very soon." Vivian laughed. She had no idea she was recording the single most expensive video of her entire life. Somewhere behind the desk, a printer had begun to hum. Louise turned toward it, and the first page slid out face up. She read the letterhead, and her whole body went still. She had seen that crest that very morning stamped on the thick envelope. Whitfield had waved off as corporate junk not 90 minutes earlier. "Mr. Whitfield," she said. Her voice came out strange, high and tight, in a way that finally cut through his performance. "Mr. Whitfield, you need to see this, right now." "Not now, Helen," he snapped, not even looking up. "I'm busy." "Her name is Louise," Marcus said, and something in the way he said it, gentle and final all at once, made 3 separate people in that lobby stop breathing for a second. "Sir," Louise said, stepping out from behind the desk, the pages trembling in her hand. "I really, really think you want to stop talking now." Something in her tone finally landed. The lobby turned, almost as one body, toward the woman holding those pages. Marcus, for the first time all morning, allowed himself the smallest possible smile. "Go ahead, Louise," he said gently. "Read it out loud. Let everyone hear." Her hands were still shaking, but her voice found its footing as she began. "This is a notice of ownership transfer, filed and signed 11 days ago." She swallowed hard. "It says, Ashcroft Belmont Holdings, the entity that owns this club, the land, the buildings, the golf course, every physical asset, was acquired in full by Delaney Heritage Holdings." The word Delaney landed in that lobby like a dropped glass shattering on stone. "For $187 million, Louise went on, her voice steadier now. "The seller was in bankruptcy proceedings. The buyer took everything, effect immediately upon signing." She looked up. "The buyer is named on the final page. The new owner. The individual with sole management authority over this entire club." She turned the last sheet around, so the whole room could see the signature block for themselves. Marcus Delaney. For a moment, nobody in that lobby breathed at all. Whitfield's face went through something complicated and fast. The smugness peeled off, first, like paint stripped in fast motion, replaced by confusion, and then by the slow dawning horror of a man doing math he desperately did not want to finish. That's fabricated," he stammered. "Anybody can print a letterhead on a home printer." "It came off your own corporate fax line, Mr. Whitfield," Louise said. "The one only management is authorized to use. And it matches this." She held up the thick, still sealed envelope from her tray, the one he had told her to file as junk that very morning. Right on cue, the front doors swung open. A woman in a sharp charcoal blazer walked in fast, heels striking the marble like gavel blows. This was Meredith Hale, the club's outgoing board chair, who had gotten Renata Cole's confirmation call on her way to the parking lot and turned her car straight back around. She took one look at Marcus and stopped cold. "Mr. Delaney," she said, loud and clear enough for the entire lobby to hear. "We were not told you would be visiting in person today. I am so sorry. Is there a problem?" Then she saw the 2 torn halves of a laminated card in Renee's purse strap. She saw Zora's wet eyes. She saw Whitfield frozen mid-sentence and Pruitt backing slowly toward the wall, like the floor had turned to ice beneath him. Meredith Hale, who had spent 3 years trying and failing to discipline this man, only to be overruled again and again by an old board that valued his fundraising over his conduct, felt something she had not felt in a long time inside that building. Relief. cold, clean relief. "Preston," she said softly. "What did you do?" His name was Grant. She had said it wrong on purpose, and everyone in earshot understood exactly why. Whitfield's mouth opened and closed twice with nothing coming out. Marcus finally stepped forward. He did not tower over anyone. He did not raise his voice. He simply stopped being quiet, and the difference filled the entire room like a change in air pressure before a storm. "Grant Whitfield," he said. "General manager, 24 years. You told me to write it down, remember?" Whitfield said nothing. "You told me my kind isn't welcome here. You told me to crawl back to whatever neighborhood spat me out. You tore up my daughter's tournament credential in front of 40 people. And you said, whoops." He let each line land fully before moving to the next. "I bought this club 11 days ago. I came here today in a ball cap and work boots because I wanted to see how Magnolia Bluff actually treats the people it doesn't think matter. I wanted the real version, not the one you put on for the people you've decided are worth your time." He looked slowly around the silent lobby. "Well, I got exactly what I came for." The power in that room had not just shifted. It had flipped completely, in the space of roughly 90 seconds, thrown like a switch by a hand that had never once trembled. Pruitt suddenly remembered he had somewhere urgent to be. He let go of every ounce of menace he'd been carrying and tried to make himself as small as possible, which is genuinely difficult when you're built like a vending machine. Vivian Cross, live stream still running, finally understood exactly what she was holding in her hand. Her thumb stabbed frantically at the screen, trying to end the broadcast, but it was already far too late. Thousands had already watched, and the footage was already saving itself onto phones she would never be able to track down. "Don't stop now," Marcus told her mildly. "You said it's a public space, and you can film whatever you want, remember? You're going to want this footage. So will several lawyers." Vivian's face went white as chalk. Zora stepped up beside her father. She lifted her own phone, screen facing the room, the red dot still glowing steady. "I got all of it, too," she said, her voice finally finding its footing. Every word. From the second he said, "Get lost." Marcus nodded at her, unmistakably proud, then turned back to Whitfield. "Here's what happens now," he said. "But first, I want you to do one thing for me." "What?" Whitfield croaked. "Sit down," Marcus said. "In the lobby, you didn't think we were good enough to stand in. Sit down and listen, because this next conversation is going to take a while, and you are going to hear every part of it." Meredith Hale moved to Marcus's side. "Mr. Delaney," she said, "on behalf of the board, I want you to know some of us have been trying to deal with this man for years. I have a folder, complaints, patterns. I kept every single one because I always believed someday it would finally matter." "I'd like to see that folder," Marcus said. "You'll have it within the hour," she said, and she meant every word. Grant Whitfield, 24 years the undisputed king of Magnolia Bluff, looked around at staff who would no longer meet his eyes and members who had stopped chuckling entirely, and slowly, stiffly, lowered himself into a chair. The marble beneath his feet was cold. The jazz had long since stopped. For the first time all morning, the silence in that room finally belonged to the Delaneys. Whitfield sat, and the excuses came immediately, the way they always do from men who have never once had to answer for anything. "Mr. Delaney, sir, there has been a terrible misunderstanding." His voice had gone soft and oily, every drop of venom drained out of it. "I was simply enforcing club policy. We've had break-ins before. I had no way of knowing who you were." "You didn't ask who I was," Marcus said. "You told me what I was. There's a difference, and it is the only difference that has ever mattered to you." "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," Whitfield stammered, tugging at his collar. "Some of my best members are, I've never once had a formal complaint filed against me." Meredith Hale made a small sound, almost a laugh, and lifted the folder she had just promised. 19 complaints, Grant," she said. I counted them on the drive over. 19, going back 11 years. The number hung there in the cold air. 19 years he'd bragged about running the club. 19 complaints buried, one for nearly every year he'd run it exactly the way he pleased. Marcus pulled a chair around and sat directly across from Whitfield, close, unhurried, lacing his fingers together like a man settling in for something that mattered. "Here is what happens now," he said. "I own this club, which means I own the decision sitting in front of me. And the decision is not complicated at all." He turned to Meredith. "As of this moment, Grant Whitfield is terminated for cause. Walk him out the front." "Same door he wanted to drag my family through, with genuine pleasure," Meredith said. Whitfield shot up out of the chair. "You can't do this. I have a contract. I have rights I can," Marcus said simply. "Read your contract again. There's a conduct clause. You violated it roughly 9 separate times in the last 12 minutes, on camera, in front of 41 witnesses and a live broadcast." He shrugged. "You did the hard part for me." Then he turned to Dale Pruitt, still trying uselessly to melt into the wall. "You put your hands on my son. You shoved a guest who never once threatened you. Your contract is done as well. Talk to a lawyer before you talk to anyone else about what happened here today. That's not a threat. That's genuinely free advice." Pruitt opened his mouth, thought better of it, and closed it again. Vivian Cross had been edging toward the exit this whole time, head down, hoping to slip out unnoticed in the chaos. Marcus did not even raise his voice. "Miss Cross," she froze mid-step. "That livestream you ran," he said, "the caption you typed. The close-up of my 18-year-old daughter's face while she was crying. It's public now, saved, shared several thousand times over. You made absolutely sure of that yourself." He let it sit for a moment. "You are going to be hearing from people. I'd hold on to that phone if I were you." Vivian's confident, mimosa-bright expression had disappeared entirely. She looked, in that moment, like exactly what she actually was, a person who had been cruel for an audience and had simply forgotten that an audience cuts in both directions. But here is the part worth paying close attention to, because it is the part that made everything afterward mean something. Marcus never once gloated. He never raised his voice into the space Whitfield had left behind. He turned instead to the staff standing frozen against the walls, terrified they might be next. "None of this falls on you," he told them. "You were following a manager who built an entire culture out of fear, and that culture ends today. Your jobs are safe. I mean every word of that." You could feel the whole room exhale at once. A young server near the kitchen door actually began to cry, the quiet, relieved kind of tears that come after holding your breath too long. Then Marcus walked over to the front desk, to Louise, who was still clutching the pages like a life raft in open water. "You didn't file that envelope when he told you to," he said gently, "and you kept the reservation printout. Why?" Louise's chin trembled. "Because it wasn't right," she said. "What he did to you, to your girl. I've watched him do smaller versions of this for 19 years, and I never once found the nerve to stop him. I couldn't be part of it again. Not this time." Marcus looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "What's your full name?" "Louise Tanner." "Louise Tanner," he repeated, the same way he had repeated Whitfield's name an hour earlier, except this time it sounded like a gift instead of a sentence. "I'm going to remember that one, too." Outside through the tall windows, 2 staff members walked Grant Whitfield down the front steps. The same steps. The same door he had promised to drag a family through. The man who had spent the morning deciding who belonged was escorted off the property he had believed until 11 minutes ago that he still controlled, blinking hard in the sunlight. Suddenly, nobody at all. Zora watched him go through the glass. Then she looked down at the 2 torn halves of her tournament card, resting in her mother's open hand, and for the first time all morning, she let herself breathe all the way out. By that evening, The footage was everywhere. Vivian's own live stream broke first, the thing she had filmed to humiliate a family, becoming the exact thing that ended up condemning her. Someone clipped it, captioned it with the plain truth, and set it loose. Then Zora's cleaner footage surfaced hours later, full audio intact, every ugly word preserved. By midnight, it had a name online, the kind of shorthand that spreads faster than any press release ever could. People were calling it the Magnolia Bluff tape. The line played on a loop across every platform. "Get your people out of my clubhouse before I have you removed like trash." Then the gut punch caption stamped underneath every single repost. He owned the club. He'd bought it 11 days before. The general manager had screamed at the man who signed his own paycheck. News crews parked outside the front gates by morning. Reporters stood on a lawn Marcus now legally owned, microphones raised, the club's name scrolling in red along the bottom of every screen. Members who had chuckled along in that lobby spent the following week quietly scrubbing their social media accounts. The man in the checkered golf pants issued a public statement nobody believed for a second. But virality fades within days. What came next did not fade at all, because Marcus Delaney had never wanted a viral moment in the first place. He wanted a full reckoning, and now he owned every single filing cabinet in the building. He started with Meredith's folder, 19 complaints stretching back over a decade, most of them buried without action. Then he ordered a complete, independent audit of every record the club had ever kept, brought in outside investigators, and gave them exactly one instruction: turn over every rock in this building, no matter how deep it's buried. What they found was considerably worse than one bad morning caught on camera. It was a pattern, long, deliberate, and thoroughly documented. Membership applications from Black and Hispanic families quietly flagged and rejected for years running, while white applicants with weaker credentials sailed through without a second look. Margin notes in Whitfield's own handwriting, the kind of language no human being should ever have to read written about themselves. Staff of color repeatedly passed over for promotion, while every open position went to Whitfield's personal circle. Workers pushed out the moment they raised a complaint. Service quietly, accidentally forgotten for guests who simply didn't fit the picture Whitfield preferred. And buried deep in the personnel files, employment clauses that violated federal civil rights protections in plain black and white. Whitfield had been running a private kingdom with his own private rules for nearly a quarter century, and the old ownership had looked the other way for exactly as long as the money kept flowing steadily in. Investigators tracked down former staff members who had quietly left over the years, without ever making noise about why. One by one, they came forward. A line cook fired for attitude the day after he reported hearing a slur directed at him. A locker room attendant quietly told to use a separate break area from everyone else. A caddy who had watched promotion after promotion go to men with half his experience and had eventually simply stopped applying at all. For years, each of them had privately believed it had only happened to them. Now, sitting in the same conference room, being interviewed, one after another, they realized together that it had never once been isolated. It had been the design of the entire operation. The lawsuits arrived fast, the pattern went public. A federal civil rights case landed squarely on Whitfield, and the club entity he'd run, built entirely on his own paper trail, his own handwriting, his own recorded voice from that Saturday morning. There was no spinning a video the whole country had already watched millions of times. Whitfield hired one lawyer, then a second. It made no real difference in the end. You cannot argue your way out of your own margin notes. The trial drew crowds every single day. Reporters filled the courtroom benches, and the prosecution simply played Whitfield's own words back to the room, over and over. His voice, his handwriting, his smile the exact moment he said whoops. He had built the entire case against himself, one act of cruelty at a time, apparently never once imagining that anyone would ever hold him fully accountable for any of it. In the end, the court handed down a 2-year suspended sentence and a civil penalty of $2.3 million. He kept his freedom by the thinnest possible margin and lost everything else that had ever mattered to him. His name became the kind of thing that quietly disqualifies a resume before anyone even finishes reading it. No club in the entire country would touch him again. The man who had spent 24 years deciding who belonged now belonged nowhere at all. Something in him did finally crack. Months later, during a deposition nobody expected him to sit for voluntarily. Asked directly why he had torn the card, Whitfield went quiet for a long time, staring at his own hands on the table. "I don't fully know anymore," he finally said, his voice smaller than anyone in that room had ever heard it. "I think I just liked the feeling of deciding. I never once stopped to ask myself what it cost the other person." It was the closest thing to an honest sentence he had spoken in 24 years. And it changed absolutely nothing about the outcome. Some doors, once they close, do not reopen simply because you finally understand why they closed. Dale Pruitt pleaded out on a battery charge for putting his hands on Isaiah. He lost his security license permanently. He had shoved the wrong young man on the wrong morning, and it followed him for the rest of his working life. Vivian Cross found her own viral video, becoming the centerpiece of a civil suit filed against her directly. The close-up she had filmed of a crying 18-year-old, the caption she had typed with such a satisfied little smile. All of it read aloud in open court. All of it entered into evidence one line at a time. She settled rather than let a jury watch footage in full. The exact words she had bragged about that morning, "It's a public space. I can film whatever I want," came back to cost her considerably more than she had ever imagined possible. The old board issued a long, carefully worded apology. Other private clubs across 3 states suddenly discovered an urgent need to review their own membership policies. Funny how quickly that happens once the cameras finally turn the right direction. But Marcus was not finished, and this next part matters more than everything that came before it. He could have sold the club for a tidy profit and simply walked away. He could have made it even more exclusive, more expensive, a private fortress with his own name carved over the gate. Plenty of men in his position would have done exactly that. Instead, he tore the gate down. He renamed the club entirely. Magnolia Bluff became Delaney Commons, and the word commons meant precisely what it sounds like. He opened the grounds to the surrounding community every single weekend, free of charge, no exceptions. Kids who had never once seen the inside of a club like that were suddenly out on the putting greens, laughing, learning to hold a club properly for the first time in their lives. He launched a golf scholarship fund specifically for kids of color across 3 counties, the kind of doors that had been welded shut for 24 years, thrown open all at once. He rewrote the entire membership process from the ground up, transparent and reviewed by an outside oversight committee with real, written, enforceable penalties for discriminations spelled out in language anyone could actually read and understand. And then he found Louise Tanner, the woman who had refused to file the truth away when it would have been so much easier to obey. "General manager," he told her, "the whole building. Run it like people actually matter. I think you already know exactly how." Louise cried right there at the desk, where she had worked for 19 years. Then she said yes. Months later, on a bright Saturday morning, you would not have recognized that same lobby at all. Neighborhood families wandered the halls freely. A line of kids waited their turn on the practice green outside, laughing and shoving each other good-naturedly. Louise greeted every single person who walked through the door by their first name, because she had taken the time to learn every single one. Out on the lawn, Zora Delaney was teaching a group of 10-year-old girls how to grip a club properly for the first time. Isaiah chased down a runaway golf cart, laughing the whole way. Renee watched from a bench in the sun, her purse resting beside her. Marcus stood in the doorway of the building that had once tried to throw his family out onto the street and watched it fill slowly with everyone it used to keep away. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to say a single word. The card Whitfield had torn in half, Zora had it framed. Both pieces, side by side, hanging now in the new clubhouse hallway where every single visitor passes on their way to the greens. Underneath it, a small brass plaque reads simply, "This is who we used to turn away. Never again." So that's the story. A man in a ball cap walked into a club he secretly owned, was told his family wasn't welcome, and instead of burning the place to the ground, he opened its gates to every single person it used to lock out. I want to be honest with you for a second, because the hardest part of this story is also the truest part. Marcus Delaney had something almost nobody in his position ever actually has. He had the deed already sitting in his pocket. He had a lawyer on speed dial and 187 million reasons. Whitfield had no choice but to eventually listen. The cards still got torn. Zora still lost something she can never fully get back. But Marcus was holding the winning hand the entire time. And most people who hear those exact same words never once get to hold a hand like that. Most people just get the humiliation and the long, quiet drive home afterward and the question that follows them around for days. Did that actually just happen to me? The Delaneys are invented. But that locked-out feeling, that carded when nobody else is a feeling, that smile that isn't really a smile at all, none of that is invented. It shows up in real lobbies, in real courtrooms, with real names attached, more often than most of us would ever like to admit. The only fantasy in the entire story is that the person on the receiving end happened to secretly own the building. So here is the version worth actually carrying with you. In most of these stories, there is no secret owner walking through the door to save the day at the last possible second. There is only a room full of people who quietly decide that watching is easier than acting. Remember that lobby. 41 people saw exactly what happened to the Delaneys that morning. 41 people had forks in their hands and phones in their pockets, and almost every single one of them simply kept eating. The real hero of this story was not only the man with $187 million behind him. It was also Louise Tanner, a woman earning close to minimum wage, who risked the only job she had to slide one piece of paper under a desk blotter. She didn't own a single thing in that building. She just finally refused to look away one more time. That is the part you can actually take with you and use. You probably don't have a deed in your pocket, but you have eyes. You have a voice that works. You have a phone that records. And sometimes the bravest thing in an entire room is not the person holding the most power at all. It's the person with the least, quietly deciding not to stay quiet. So here is what I genuinely want to know, and I read every single one of these. Have you ever been treated like you didn't belong somewhere you had every right to stand? Or were you the one standing off to the side, watching it happen, trying to figure out what on earth to do? Tell me in the comments. Tell me what you actually said or what you still wish you'd said. I read every word, the good ones and the hard ones both. And if this story reached something in you, you already know what to do next. Like it, if you think Marcus handled that lobby with more grace than most of us could have managed. Share it. So the next Grant Whitfield out there thinks twice before he ever opens his mouth like that again. And subscribe, because around here, the truth always finds its way out eventually. Here is the last thing, and then I'll let you go. Justice in this story was never loud. It wasn't a man screaming louder than the man who wronged him. It was a guy in scuffed-up boots who simply refused to shrink, and who then turned around and held the door wide open for every single person standing behind him. That's the actual move, not just winning, opening the door afterward. So ask yourself honestly, and really sit with the answer for a second. If you had been the person at the next table over that morning, not the owner, just a regular guest, watching a family get torn apart by a man with a name tag and an ugly heart, what is the first thing you would have actually said? And be honest with yourself, because your heart probably would have been pounding. Your hands might have shaken, the exact same way Louise's did behind that desk. That's completely normal. Courage was never the absence of that fear. It's simply the thing you choose to do while your hands are still shaking. I really hope you'd have said something. I'll see you in the next one.